Now, the Israeli Defense Forces claim it intercepted two unmanned aerial vehicles that were launched into the country between 8:11 and 8:12 a.m. local time in Judea and the Dead Sea areas. This is the latest that we're getting. The Israeli Defense Forces claim that it intercepted two unmanned aerial vehicles that were launched into the country around 8 a.m. local time in Judea and the Dead Sea areas. This, as you know, Iran carried out a second wave of attacks on Israel. They've also now said that the war will expand in the coming days, including strikes even on U.S. air bases. And in the latest, from what we're hearing, Israeli defense forces have claimed that it intercepted two unmanned aerial vehicles that were launched into the country. All right, for more on this, we're being joined now by my colleague Eric Njoka and also live by Lynn ODonnell from London. She's a journalist and an author. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. ODonnell. I want to begin by asking you what your assessment of the tensions escalating in West Asia is at the moment.
Hi, thanks for having me. I think that your assessment that this is now a war is correct. I think that this has been building for quite some time. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has had this sort of attack on Iran on the cards for quite some time, some analysts say for up to 20 years, in search of a legacy. But for Israel, he sees this as being existential. As we already know, and as you've said, the assessments of Iran's building nuclear capability has become quite alarming. The International Atomic Energy Agency said a couple of days ago that for the first time in 20 years, Iran was no longer complying with its obligations on limiting its enrichment activities and potentially moving towards getting a bomb, basically. And this Benjamin Netanyahu sees as an existential threat for Israel. I think that they knew, America, Donald Trump, and Israel under Netanyahu both knew that they would receive a fairly ferocious retaliatory response from Iran, as we've seen overnight with the launching of drones and ballistic missiles, and that America is preparing. Its bases are now targets for Iranian retaliation and aggression, and it's building up in the region and has done, as you know, and as you said, delivered munitions to Israel to prepare for this. So I think we are going to see, and Netanyahu has said himself, that we are going to see this ongoing for some days. Israel is basically locked down. Iran is attacking the airport. There have been no flights in and out for more than 24 hours. And I think as Israel's preemptive strike was in response to what was seen as an existential threat, the Iranian regime is also now regarding this attack as an existential threat.
Mm-hmm. Ms. O'Donnell, talking about America's involvement, there have been world leaders who are saying that both sides should maintain restraint, that is Iran and Israel. But some critics are accusing America of being complicit. Even Donald Trump says that he's ready for the talks to go on, but Iran is saying that those talks are meaningless. Going forward, how is the situation going to look like?
Well, I think that this is really interesting because the American officials in the immediate aftermath, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, essentially distanced themselves from the Israeli attack on Iran, saying, we didn't know about it, they're doing it unilaterally. And then Donald Trump undercut that within hours. He told one of the major friendly news organizations in the United States that he had talked with Netanyahu beforehand, and he also went on later in the day to relate the the aggression between Iran and Israel directly to the United States talks with Iran on a new nuclear agreement. As you know, during his first term, he cancelled America's involvement in the JCPOA that Obama had been behind. His modus operandi has been to repudiate everything that his successors have done. And so he gave Iran 60 days to come to the table and talk seriously about another deal, which would be aimed at limiting its nuclear capacities, its aggressive nuclear capacities. And Iranian leaders had not done so. He said very clearly in an interview with a CNN correspondent that I gave them 60 days. This is day 61. That 60-day deadline expired on Friday. On Thursday. I'm sorry. Israel struck on Friday, and then a few hours later, Donald Trump is saying, you ran out of time, and the leaders that I was talking to are now dead. So if you want something to happen that maintains the viability of your regime, you better come to the table and talk. Now, those talks were initially scheduled to take place tomorrow on Sunday, but whether or not they will go ahead remains a question, and the Iranians seem to be trying to dig in and say everything's off the table now. But, as Trump has said in the past to people that he's been belligerent towards, Iran doesn't really have very many cards here.
Ms. O'Donnell, why is Israel playing spoil sports in this scenario? Because Donald Trump spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, actually told him to cool off, to wait. But now Benjamin Netanyahu went ahead and even struck nuclear facilities in Iran, majorly destroying the talks, majorly destroying the negotiations. So going forward, even if those negotiations or talks do happen, how will this relationship be pacified?
Are you talking about the Israel-United States relationship?
Iran-United States relationship?
Oh, I think that the Iran-United States relationship, to pacify it, I don't know whether that's quite the right word. I think really that Trump's comments after the Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear facilities and, the assassination of very senior people in its military hierarchy and nuclear physicists, I went ahead with Donald Trump's approval. I don't think that Israel acted unilaterally at all. I think probably the analysis that we should be looking at here is that Israel is now a proxy in Donald Trump's strategy for developing the relationship with Iran that he wants, which is of course is subjugative and one that limits Iran's possibility and potential for for developing nuclear weapons. He has said specifically and explicitly that he does not want Iran to have a nuclear capacity, nuclear weapons at all. And I think that there should be no doubt that Israel has acted with the approval, tacit or otherwise, of the United States, and that is now in a position of being Donald Trump's proxy in a campaign to bring Iran to heel on an agreement that it does not develop nuclear weapons.
Ms. O'Donnell, let me just come in there, and of course we've been speaking to experts all morning as well, and I just wanted to seek some clarity on this as well. We spoke to Professor James A. Russell, who said that this should have never happened. We should have never strayed from the path of diplomacy, which was being pursued, although there was a stalemate there as well. Then we spoke to Dr. Charles Kupchan, who said, well, why did this not happen earlier? So we're seeing two contrasting viewpoints there. That being said, we do know that the Iran-US talks were not headed anywhere. They were at an impasse. For Donald Trump to now reiterate that he really does hope that Iran would come to the negotiating table, that wouldn't you say that seems perhaps wishful thinking at this point? And while we say that, Israel is now engaged in a multi-front war. It is engaged in a war in Gaza as well. So what I really want to understand is how is Israel balancing these short-term, perhaps tactical successes with the longer-term diplomatic cost of a regional escalation as such?
Yeah, I think that you've hit on a number of points there. Let's go back to what was the point of this in terms of Donald Trump's strategy for Iran. I think that what he's doing is, as he said, and as I just said before, he gave them 60 days, and this was day 61. The IEAE, which is the Atomic Energy Monitoring Organization under the United Nations umbrella, had also sounded the alarm a couple of days earlier by saying that Iran was now, after 20 years and for the first time in 20 years, no longer complying with its obligations not to enrich uranium to the point that it could be weaponized. So you have those two things. Donald Trump gave them 2 months, gave the Iranian regime 2 months to come to the table and appear to be genuine in its desire to negotiate on this. Those 2 months expired on Thursday, and the day before that, the IEAE, which has long been seen as extremely conservative and peaceful, really. We can remember back to the way it was in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was being accused of having weapons of mass destruction. The IEAE was very much a steadying hand there. But now it says that the Iranians, what it's implying is that the Iranians are moving towards weaponizing their uranium enrichment program. So this hasn't come out of the blue. Donald Trump has made it very clear. Your deadline was Thursday. The attack was Friday, and we talked about it. So, if you put it in Clausewitzian terms, I think, what he's basically done is allow Israel, as I think his proxy, its head in going after Iran's nuclear program. This is a show of strength. Iran is on the back foot here. So I think that diplomacy. He said diplomacy is on the table, but he's backing it up with force, and that's classic diplomacy, really. I mean, if you want the upper hand, you've got to back it up with something, and Donald Trump has the cards.
All right, Ms. O'Donnell, please just do stay on with us. We have news coming in. Iran has threatened to attack U.S. bases in West Asia in response to Israel's recent strikes on its nuclear and military facilities. And according to a report by the Iranian news agency Fars, citing a military source who claimed that the next stage of the Iranian military operation against Israel may include strikes on the U.S. bases in West Asia in the coming days. So Iran has threatened to attack U.S. bases in West Asia in response to Israel's recent strikes on its nuclear and military facilities. This was a report that was citing a military source claimed that the next stage of Iranian military operation against Israel may include strikes on U.S. bases in West Asia. Right, Ms. O'Donnell, this is the latest that is coming in, where it is saying that it may strike U.S. military bases. It did say this earlier as well. Now, we are seeing perhaps a vicious cycle here. Israel carries out its preemptive strikes. Of course, it begins with a stalemate between the United States and Iran. Then Israel carries out its preventive strikes. We're seeing retaliatory strikes. Iran continues to say that the United States is complicit. United States, though, has said it's not militarily involved and it's distancing itself, but we all, to a certain degree, understand its role that it's playing in this conflict. That being said, are we perhaps seeing the opening of a phase where a new shadow war, where conventional lines perhaps no longer apply?
Well, maybe so, but Iran has been playing a shadow war against Israel for a very long time. You've got to remember that it has anti-Israeli proxies across the region, the Houthis in Yemen, the Hezbollah, the Shia militia in Lebanon, and of course Hamas in Gaza, which was behind those horrific attacks that started the latest phase of conflict in the region. So this is why Netanyahu has been so belligerent and I think intent on launching these strikes against Israel against Iran to disable its capacity to build a bomb which will be aimed at Israel. The Iranian regime is on the record constitutionally obliged to support the destruction of the state of Israel. And so this is existential for Israel. And Netanyahu has made that clear, and the Americans have made clear that they support the state of Israel and they support Israel's actions of self-defense. They called this preemptive strike on Iran that took place on Friday an act of self-defense. So, yeah, let's see whether Iran backs up its threat to attack the United States facilities in the region. If it does, then I think that we're in trouble, basically. But I would be very surprised if we do see more than a little bit of argy-bargy, which Iran has shown in the past that it's capable of. But you've also got to remember that this is existential for the Iranian regime. These attacks on Friday took place because they were planned by a Mossad base, an Israeli intelligence agency base inside Iran. It is astounding that Mossad has been able to build that capacity inside Iran. It's like a Hollywood movie. But then you've got to remember that the Iranian regime is extremely unpopular inside Iran. And so it makes it much easier for an extremely capable intelligence agency like Mossad to build sources and assets inside the country. So nobody is safe. Where is the leadership? They're in bunkers deep underground. They can't trust anybody. And people in Iran will be, I think, in coming days, the longer this goes on, more and more emboldened to come out on the streets. We saw that a couple of years ago over the murder by the state of a young woman for not for not wearing a proper headscarf. The Iranian people do not like and do not support the regime, and so there could be a point at which, and Netanyahu made this clear yesterday, for 50 years you've been living under the yoke of this theocratic regime, and we want you, like us, to live a good life without them. This is part of encouraging regime change, and I think that the Iranian regime figures know that as much as anybody. This is really about regime survival and regime change in Iran.
Ms. O'Donnell, actually the Israeli Prime Minister did say that this is a fight for freedom. He actually asked Iranians to be united in fighting against the regime. But that being said, a simple question: how vulnerable are the states that neighbor Iran and Israel in this proxy war, if you like?
Yeah, well, since October the 7th, 2023, we've seen how vulnerable they are. Look what happened in Lebanon. The Syrian regime was toppled. The possibility of this broadening out into a regional conflagration can't be overstated. But we've also got to remember that it is Iran that is behind those belligerent groups. Iran has a grip on militancy in the region, and this is and Israel is the only democratic state in a region of autocracy and theocracy and militancy, jihadism, terrorism. So, when I say that this is existential for Israel, I'm not overstating the situation. But I think that what he is trying to do and what he has done over the past year and a half is highlight Iran's complicity in supporting anti-Israel terrorist organizations in the region. And maybe we are seeing the end game. Pull Iran out of it, and you pull the rug from underneath these groups that explicitly, overtly, and belligerently threaten the survival of the Israeli state.
All right. Well, Eric and Ms. O'Donnell, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your insights on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.